Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Kelly. I am the Community Relations Program host at the Rochester Hills Public Library. I'd like to welcome you all to this evening's program, Becoming Mindful and Resilient in the Age of Anxiety, with Dr. Chris Willard, presented in partnership with the Rochester Area Youth Assistance. Please join us on Tuesday, June 1st at 7 p.m. for our upcoming Author Talk program, A Cancer Survivor Story, The Living Room with Bonnie J. Adario. We will leave time at the end of tonight's program for questions, but the audience will remain muted throughout to avoid any audio concerns. You can feel free to leave your questions in the chat. I'll even leave a little message after my introduction here so everyone's aware of where that is. And once we get to the end of our presenters' program, we will move over to a Q&A section, and I'll moderate, ask the questions that you guys write in. The program tonight will be recorded. It'll be available on our YouTube page and website in about 1 week's time from tonight. But having said all of that, I would now like to introduce our partner here from the Rochester Area Youth Assistance, Debbie Jones. Debbie, please take it away.
Hi there. Thank you, Joe. Debbie Jones. I am the chairman of the board for Rochester Area Youth Assistance. We have been in existence for over 65 years in the community. I think we're a gem that not enough people know about. We are a prevention-based nonprofit organization that our goal is to strengthen youth and families in the RCS community and to reduce the incidence of delinquency, abuse, neglect through volunteer and community partnerships. We have diversion programs to keep children out of the justice system. We have referrals from school personnel, police, parents. We provide financial assistance to children for after-school activities, summer camps, tutoring, school-age care, summer enrichment, and many more programs. We have a Mentor Plus program where we have volunteer adult mentors that work with area youth. We have a camp that we offer for free in the summer, Camp Safari, and we also have a family education program, which is what we are doing tonight. So even with the pandemic, we've been able to bring some programs to the community. We're proud of that, and one is tonight. We are so happy to bring Dr. Christopher Willard to you. He is a psychologist and educational consultant based in the Boston area. He specializes in mindfulness. He's been practicing meditation for 20 years and has led hundreds of workshops around the world with invitations to more than 24 countries. He currently serves on the board of directors at the Institute of Meditation and Psychotherapy and is the president of Mindfulness and Education Network. He has presented many TED Talks and presented at conferences, and his thoughts have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, mindful.org, and elsewhere. He's the author of many books, and they're good for professionals and children, as well as 6 sets of cards and therapeutic games. He also, and this is an also, which would really, to me, is a very big deal. Anyway, he teaches at Harvard Medical School. So we are proud to have him from Cambridge, Massachusetts, who has 80% of their population vaccinated. So yay for that. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you so much. And it's great to be here. Thank you so much, Debbie, for having me. And I know we've been in touch over the years, and it's a pleasure to be here, even if I'm actually inside of my basement. And you will probably hear my kids screaming and not going to bed up overhead, but we'll see how this all goes when we talk about mindfulness. So and thank you also everybody else working behind the scenes, and Joe and everybody. I know it's a lot of work to put these things on, so thank you very much. And thank you for coming out this evening for yourself, for your family. This has been not the easiest 16 months, 17 months. I've kind of lost count. And I just want to share a little bit tonight, just some we hear about things like mindfulness, we hear about resilience. It can sound like such a big thing, such a time-consuming thing. What I want to share, because we all have no bandwidth, no time, we're all sick of Zoom. So thank you for showing up for Zoom tonight. Optional Zoom you showed up for. I appreciate it. To make this really as useful as possible for you. And I just want to share some tips on resilience and mindfulness. And I want to start with talking about how the pandemic began a while back, and then talk a little bit about myself and my interest in mindfulness and this stuff. But I was sitting out in the backyard on Friday, the 13th of March. And I don't know if anyone noticed this. There were 2 Friday the 13th in 2020. It was that good of a year. I was sitting out there in the backyard. The snow is melting, probably not as much snow as you have in Michigan, but I was looking at my wife, we're watching the kids, and I was just like, the kids are always going to remember this time, and, trying to sound all deep. And my wife just looked at me and she was like, everyone's going to remember this time. Like, my wife's job is actually a medical historian. She studies plagues and pandemics. It's like literally her job and how they change the course of history. And she's like, people are going to talk about this in 100 years, and this is back also when we thought this was going to be over in 2 weeks. Remember that too. We're going to shut down schools for a couple of weeks. It'll be fine. Right. And, I remember thinking like, what do I want to do during this time? And as a parent, right, I was watching all my friends on social media and they're like, I'm going to learn 5 languages and I'm going to run a marathon from my Peloton in my living room. And I'm like, how am I going to work? How am I going to deal with my kids in school? What are we going to do? I've got a 3-year-old, I've got a 6-year-old. I'm trying to work, canceling all my travel that I usually do. And thinking maybe, the question started to become for me like, Wes, what do I want to do in this time? And even as it ends, trying to think about this too, but more like, what kind of person do I want to be during this time? And this is when everyone was going to the grocery store and taking all the toilet paper. And I was like, thinking in terms of my kids too, what kind of parent do I want to be? How do I want to be present for my kids? Who do I want to show them that I am? Do I want to be the guy that's fighting for the last roll of toilet paper? Or do I want to with my kids be let's check in with the neighbors and see if they need anything from the grocery store because we're young and healthy and we'll put on a mask and go. And I think that's really started to try to be kind of how I think about this time in terms of what are my values and how can I kind of clarify my values. And so, it's obviously, time has gone by and, we're starting to come out of this into whatever they're calling this new normal or this next normal is. And it's gonna look different. And it's also gonna look the same in a lot of ways than how things were March 12th, 2020. And it's been an interesting time to reflect. And I think we can also think about what are the things that we want to take forward with us from this time. And what's just some of the stuff we want to shut the door on and leave behind. But one of the things that I've been kind of aware of through this time is again, the kind of presence that I'm trying to have for my kids. And I know that this is about family resilience and kids and all of that. But what it really comes down to is really for us parents, us adults, teachers, whoever you might be in the audience. And feel free, actually, if you are listening, if you're near your chat box, just maybe type in who you are, what you do, what age your kids are, something like that, so I can get a sense. But I realized also this is a scary time. And one of the things that our kids need more than anything, if you look at the research on trauma, on what are called adverse childhood experiences, which are all the lousy things that some of our kids go through and some of us have been through, and that have been scary. Kids that have gone through these experiences, they look at them and they've done some research and they say well, some of these kids are fine. And what is it that they've had in their lives that's different? And what they found was a few things. They found, number one, that kids who turn out, even after really traumatic experiences, that they've got one adult in their life, one consistent, caring, compassionate adult. They call it the charismatic adult. So if we can stay consistent and present for our kids, and trust me, I've lost it plenty during this time with my kids, on my kids, it's happened, right? But then just coming back to my kids and being yeah, you know what, I was really upset, I was worried, let's come back together. That's actually what's important. It's okay to have conflicts with our kids. It's okay to have conflicts with our spouse, right? With the other folks in our lives, right? What's important is how we model, how we come back together. How do we model that repair after there's been a conflict? That actually strengthens our relationships. And it also does this process that's really interesting that's happening in our brains, and it happens a lot in the brains of kids, called co-regulation. where, well, let me just share actually a little bit of my screen here. I've got a few things on here. I saw this meme online a couple of years ago, right? It says, never in the history of calming down has anyone ever calmed down by being told to calm down. And I don't know if you've tried this with your kids. I've tried it with my kids. I've tried as a therapist. I used to be a special education teacher, right? Our kids aren't going to calm down, or we might actually say regulate themselves, regulate their emotions, right? Until they feel safe enough to calm down. And where they're going to get that safety signal, they're going to get it from us. And again, we're all going to lose it sometimes in this pandemic and even afterwards. But what's important is that we create a space in which our kids feel safe enough to calm down, or if they're having a hard time, right, we can get down to their level and say, like, it's okay, mom or dad, we're going to keep you safe. We are safe right now. We're going to get through this. Like, dad's upset right now, but he's going to take a few breaths. He needs a little space to himself right now too, right? And we're going to find a way to connect and come back. And that does so much to help our kids be more resilient, is by modeling our own resilience. Or even, again, if we are anxious, that we teach them a skill, or we model a skill, or we practice something together where we're showing them how we manage our stress, our anxiety in a way that's healthy, in a way that's safe, in a way that's sustainable. And I do this work around mindfulness, and people are always asking me, like, well, like, how do we create more mindful kids? Or I go to a school, how do we create mindful students? And it's like, well, I know really well how we create stressed out, miserable kids. You just surround them with stressed out, miserable adults. And I'm sure we've all had our days, again, in this last year or so. But what that means is that the best way to create more mindful kids, compassionate kids, present kids, happy kids, is to surround them with more mindful, compassionate, present adults. And that comes back to our own self-regulation. And then we co-regulate with the kids, because our emotions are actually really contagious. And unfortunately, the emotion that's most contagious is actually anxiety, but it's actually the emotion that we can actually do the most about. But when we do things like practice mindfulness, and I haven't explained what that is yet, I will, right? Like, when parents practice mindfulness or manage their stress, the kids are happier, the kids are better behaved. There's fewer just like accidents in the home and things like that, better communication in the home. When educators practice mindfulness or manage their stress, the kids are performing better in school. The kids are behaving better in school. They're showing up to school more often. I'm a therapist. That's my day job. Therapists who practice mindfulness manage their emotions. The clients get better faster. This is all true in the research, which is what's really cool, is that this stuff really is contagious. But if we want our kids to be more resilient, right, we're really doing that, a lot of that work ourselves. And so I started, actually, during this pandemic, I started writing a book, because I was doing all these workshops all of a sudden on resilience and on this idea of post-traumatic growth. And this is what I found that's really interesting, is that, 60% of adults, I think, and kids will experience some kind of trauma in their life. But actually, most people after a trauma will experience what's called post-traumatic growth, coming through that stronger rather than post-traumatic stress. That's really important to know, that this can actually be an opportunity for us to build more resilience if we do a few things, right? And to me, it's how do we take care of ourselves on really a few different levels. So the model of understanding why we're happy or unhappy, basically, is called the biopsychosocial model. And that's a big fancy word that you don't need to remember. But basically what it means is that we need to start by taking good care of our bodies and helping our kids learn how to do that. Take good care of our minds, right? Not get them all clouded up, and take good care of our relationships with our kids and with other people. And so that's just kind of how I want to frame this little bit of a talk, or what are a few things that we can do ourselves, for our kids, with our kids, and that they can do to build more resilience for our bodies, for our minds, for our relationships, because these are going to keep us healthy and happy and resilient. It also just occurred to me that every time I leave New England, people tell me that I talk really, really fast. So if I'm talking too fast, tell me to slow down. I won't be offended. So, mindfulness is really just this idea that we can be more intentional, be more aware. We can say paying attention to the present moment with acceptance and non-judgment, just trying to be present. And we know that in times like this, right, we're racing off to the future. What's going to happen? Is the mask mandate going to lift? What am I going to do at the grocery store? What's going to happen, right? Or we're stuck in the past, being more depressed. But when we come into the present, we can be a little bit happier. And we can't be in the present moment at every single moment. We have to think about the future. We have to plan. Do I wear my mask or not next week? When do I get my next vaccine, right? These kinds of things. Right? But the more we can be in the moment, actually, the happier we are. The research actually really bears this out as well. And so what we're trying to do are just find a few ways to bring more mindfulness to a few aspects of our life. And so I want to start with our bodies. And how can we maybe bring a little bit more mindfulness to caring for our bodies? And I just want to talk a little bit about stress and the ways that stress impacts us. And one of the things that you may have noticed during this pandemic is that stress impacts the way that we eat, right? We talk about the quarantine 15, which actually is on average the quarantine 41 is how much weight most of us have gained, is 41 pounds during this pandemic. We've been sedentary. We've been not eating so healthfully. We've been sitting in front of our computers all the time. But there are also, in our bodies, when we're stressed out, we crave different foods, right? The fight or flight response, right? You're craving sugar and fat and salt because that gives you short-term energy. You're not craving kale when you're stressed out. Even if you're not stressed out, you're probably not craving kale, but there are ways we can bring more awareness to what we eat. And so there's some wonderful mindfulness practices about mindful eating, and we don't have time to get into those, but just really thinking a little bit like, I wrote this article a few years ago, like there's mindless eating, which is just eating past full, ignoring our body signals, compared to more mindful eating, just listening to our body and stopping when we're full. Mindlessly eating because our emotions tell us to eat. We're sad, we're scared, we're bored, we're lonely. Versus more mindfully eating because our bodies tell us to eat, right? We're low energy, our stomach's growing. Mindlessly eating at random versus more mindfully trying to eat with others and at set times and places. Mindlessly eating just comfort foods, and comfort foods are fine, but just sugar and fat and salt, not so good, right? More mindfully trying to also bring in some foods that are nutritionally healthy. Mindlessly, the eating and multitasking thing that a lot of us get caught up with, versus more mindfully trying to, just when we're eating, put away the phone, the computer, trying to not eat in front of the TV, but especially as a family, trying to just, enjoy each other's company a little bit, a few nights a week. And lastly, rather than just thinking about the meal as an end product, really trying to think about where it's come from. And one thing that the pandemic has done for me is like, I just realized suddenly like, oh my gosh, all these people are like working at the grocery store and risking their lives, or like working at the factories. And these are conversations that we can have with our kids about how connected we all are as people. And so just bringing a little bit more awareness in some ways to eating. We can also do things like get exercise to take care of ourselves. And thankfully we can go outside and get some exercise. It was awful at the beginning when like playgrounds were closed around here. It was really tough with kids. And it's been amazing just seeing how much more time people are spending outside, right? Taking hikes, right? Going to the mountains, going to the woods, going up to the lake, things like that. Going to the beach, which we have here in the ocean, right? And really appreciating nature. We know that actually spending time in nature makes us happier. There are these like pheromones that plants give off that actually boost our mood. Just working next to a window, if you have one, actually, or getting houseplants, these can also lift your mood up a little bit. So spending time outside or with nature, we know makes us happier. And we know that just simply walking actually is one of the best forms of exercise we can get. Like I wasn't going to the gym for a long time. I am again now. But I would take these long walks for a long time, and taking these walks with my family to do phone calls and things like that. And I used to get to travel all over the world and walk in amazing places. And I was like, well, here I'm stuck in my neighborhood. But just starting to notice, like, I remember noticing last spring, it's like this block smells different today. Oh, it's because the flowers are out on this tree. Or the birds sound different in the evening than they do in the morning. Or with your kids, just like asking some of those questions. What sounds do you notice? What smells do you notice? There's this research on if you take a walk and you just notice one beautiful thing on your walk, it actually lifts up your mood for months. If you do that for a couple of weeks, just notice one beautiful thing on your walk. So some of these simple things make a difference. And we know that exercise is not just good for us physically. Mild to moderate exercise, which is 15 or 20 minutes of walking, is as good for mild to moderate depression, anxiety, and attention issues as taking medication. So just getting out there a little bit, just doing some noticing on your walk. These things can start to make a difference, or make it playful with your kids. When I was little, we didn't like call it mindful walking, but I remember going to this camp and they'd say, we're going to walk in the woods as silently as we can. Can you walk like a ninja? And I realized just by doing that, it was very playful, but like I'm not thinking about the future, the past, or where I'm just thinking about each footstep if I'm trying to walk really quietly. So these kinds of things can make it a little bit more playful. We can also do some practice helping ourselves sleep, which has not been easier, maybe getting easier. Sleep is one of the best things that we can do for our mental health. Hard to get during the pandemic, hard to get with screens telling us awful news all the time. Hard for our kids to get when they've been on their screens all the time. But I'll just guide us through a little practice that can help with sleep, and then teach a few breathing practices to you also. I want to share this practice. It's just a little acronym, CALM, and then that stands for calm, as you probably could have guessed. And I'll just guide us through this. We're just going to notice the muscles in our chest, arms, legs, and mouth. And so just I invite you to find a comfortable position. You can let your eyes close if you like. And just taking a few breaths. Just letting your breath, your exhale, just stretch out a little bit. And then bring your attention into C for your chest. Noticing any sensations in your chest. And then tensing the muscles in your chest, just squeeze those muscles. And then just release, let go, let the relaxation flow in and the tension flow back out. And then breathing now and bringing your awareness into your arms, A for arms. You might notice if you're a little bit stressed or anxious, your hands are shaking, or maybe they're sweaty, just noticing sensations in your hands and arms. And again, just tensing, making fists with your hands and squeezing your biceps, triceps, and shoulders. Feel that tension. And then just let go. Let the tension flow out. Relaxation flow in. And now bring awareness down into L for legs, just noticing sensations in your legs. Again, sometimes bouncing a little bit when we're stressed. And then squeeze the muscles in your legs, feel the tension. And just let go, let the tension flow out. Let the relaxation flow in. And bring your attention up to M for your mouth. You might notice, what expression is your mouth communicating to the world or to yourself? Any tension in your jaw? That's where I hold a lot of tension, and then clench the muscles in your mouth. Squeeze those muscles in your mouth and even the rest of your face if you like. Just clench, feel the tension. And then just let go. Just letting the relaxation flow in. As you release, you can even just allow your lips to form a smile, ever so faint if it feels natural. And you can just raise your eyes. Maybe even before you come back to the screen, you can just take a look around the room. Probably sick of looking at screens anyway. I learned this thing recently. If you spend a lot of time working on a computer, which of course is all of us, you can do this thing called 20-20-20. It's every 20 minutes, take about 20 seconds to look about 20 feet in the distance. If you notice the corners of the room or the colors, or look out the window, see if you can find something beautiful out the window. And just bring your eyes back again to the screen. So this tensing and releasing our muscles, it's hard to be stressed out and anxious if your body's relaxed. So it can help with sleep, maybe before bed with the kids or something like that. Or try this yourself if you need it, or a difficult moment in your day, do a little chest, arms, legs, mouth, tense and release. We can also use our breath to calm our bodies down a little bit. I actually heard someone say recently, your breath is kind of like a remote control for your nervous system, for your emotions. You probably noticed when you're stressed out, right, your breath gets really short and sharp. Probably notice it in your kids. When you're relaxed, it's a little more slow and even. And actually, people research anything, right? One thing that they'll research too is breathing, and what's the best number of breaths to take to help calm down. And what these researchers found was that the optimal number of breaths to take for focus, for calm, for managing our emotions, is actually about five or six breaths in a minute, which is not very many. So really slowing our breath down is actually really helpful, really powerful. And I like to say, we all know you can regulate your breath, and that regulates your body, and that regulates your nervous system and your brain, and that regulates your attention, your impulses, and your emotions, which is really, really powerful. So your breath really is kind of like this remote control. As you start to slow your breath down, it really does change how we feel. And I know, we all been told, oh, do some deep breaths. And I'll talk about how to make deep breaths fun, because for kids in particular, it's can be an eye roll. But it really is interesting that what the research finds is that, I learned this only recently, actually, you have different nerve endings in the top of your lungs than the bottom of your lungs. And if you breathe shallow, it's like dialing 911 for your nervous system. Then can send you into a panic attack or something. If you breathe more deeply and slowly, your reset button, as I say to kids, is in the bottom of your lungs. So you have to breathe really deeply to hit that reset button. And the nerve endings are different there, and it tells your body and your brain to calm down again. So finding ways to reset our breath. And there's a few different ones that I can share for different kids and different ages. And I wrote a book with a friend of mine called Alpha Breaths, which is like a book for little kids about breathing practices. And A is for the alligator breath. You can, if you've got little kids, you can do this, just breathing in and breathing out. My 3-year-old, 6-year-old will do this, breathing in and breathing out. Although once when my 6-year-old was 4, I was at a conference and I asked him to demonstrate the alligator breath, and he went like this, breathing in and out. So, you never know what kind of mileage you're going to get with your own kids. One of my favorites also, though, for young kids, and also I find teenagers like this too. Again, when I teach them, I think when my kids are teenagers, they will not want to hear it from me, but it's the hot chocolate breath. And if you just imagine you're holding like a mug of hot chocolate or something, or a bowl of soup, right? Breathing in like you're smelling, and out. Slow and steady cooling off. Breathe in smelling. Breathe out cooling off. Take a sip of your hot chocolate. Right. All of these start to settle our nervous system down a little bit. I know a lot of folks have teenagers, and they're not that interested in hot chocolate breaths, or they sometimes are, or alligator breaths. But there's other things for teenagers. Like I learned this recently. I didn't know. A lot of us automatically just like put our hands behind our head like this. And this is actually resetting our nervous system. Like if you do this, it's really hard to not breathe slowly and not breathe deeply. And so I recommend this to kids, like before the SATs, before, if you're sitting in class and overwhelmed by the test, right? Just, this really slows your breath down. No one has to know. There's another thing that we do, adults, kids, all ages, that resets our breath when we're frustrated, when we're overwhelmed, and that's sighing, right? You can all imagine that, like, especially that longer exhale, and that settles our body down. And if you live with teenagers, you probably had the experience where they sigh at you, right? They're like, oh, Dad, oh my God, right? So I'll sometimes teach teenagers, I was like, if you're really annoyed and you don't want to get in trouble, rather than sighing at your parents, you can do like a silent stealth sigh, and no one will know, but it'll actually, that long exhale, slow and steady, will calm you down. So just breathe in, and then nice, long, silent, stealth sigh. Oh my gosh, Mom and Dad, you're so lame, so annoying, just pressing all the air out to the bottom of your breath. And then just letting your breath reset itself. That hits the reset button and starts to settle your nervous system down. Or counting, breathe in for 7, breathe out to 11, right? Things like that, they really do make a difference. And of course, our kids, again, the hard part is they roll their eyes when we try to teach it to them. But it is where, talking to their teachers, or, recommending it other ways, or pointing out that maybe some of their favorite athletes are using mindfulness or breath work, that might be interesting to them in some other ways. So these are some ways to calm our bodies down and make them also more resilient for stressful situations that we're going to encounter even long after this pandemic is over. If the new normal is anything like the old normal, it's going to be pretty stressful. And I want to turn now just to our minds a little bit, our brains. When we're under stress, adults, kids, all of us, it actually really impacts our brain functioning, right? We're trying to like deal with like an immediate threat is what the stress response is for. It's not good for like long-term thinking, long-term planning. How do I get out of this situation? Not what are the consequences, right? Again, if you're like being chased by a tiger or something, you also want to interpret, we see things when we're stressed out, everything looks like a danger, right? You don't want to be like, oh, it's a cute cuddly tiger, I'll go pet it. No, it's like that tiger is scary. So we get stressed out, everything looks like a threat. We start seeing the worst in everything. Our critical thinking shuts down. So we get into very black and white thinking. It's why actually, I mentioned my wife is a medical historian, right? She was, a few months into the pandemic, she's like, so the conspiracy theories are going to start any day now, because that's what happened in this plague, and that's what happened in that plague, and that pandemic, and that epidemic from 1,000 years ago. And she was right on. But it's also like what happens, and then I'm the neuroscience guy, and I'm like, well, our brains shut down when we're under threat, and everything looks like a threat. We can't think clearly, right? It's why people start thinking in kind of conspiratorial ways. So to be able to think more clearly, we really need to settle our brains down, open them up so that we can see a little bit more clearly, so that it's not just always focused on the negative. As humans, we're already wired to focus on the negative to survive. The more stress we're under, the worse that gets. We actually take in 4 times as much negative information as positive information. But there's ways we can also shift that ratio. And we can do things like practicing gratitude and appreciation, which is actually this amazing thing that I used to work late. I used to travel all the time. And then the pandemic started and I was home for dinner every night. And that was kind of great and also kind of exhausting. But it was also really wonderful to now have a little bit more time and routine with my family to like practice a little bit of gratitude. And we can do that in a few different ways. And gratitude's not pretending that like this pandemic doesn't really stink and hasn't been really hard, right? Or that life isn't hard. It's just like, yeah, life is really tough. This pandemic is really tough, but there's also some good things happening. Not from the pandemic, but there's still just even good things happening in spite of it. And it's important that we remember those things to be more resilient. And there's a lot I could say about that, but when we practice gratitude, it makes us happier, it makes us less anxious, it makes us less depressed, we think more clearly, it actually helps with longevity, it makes us more fun to be around because we're not kind of negative Nellies. And it's not like a total Pollyanna thing. We can just take a little bit of time to just notice what's good. And so I'll just ask you, just take a moment now. If you like, you can close your eyes or just lower your eyes. It's evening time. I'll just ask you to look back over your day and just see if you can, from when you woke up to breakfast, to some time you had through the day, or people you encountered, or phone calls you had, like what was just one good thing? What went well? What was one positive experience? A good cup of coffee. The sun was shining, a walk with your dog. Your kids did their homework without being asked to. Just pick that moment and take a moment to look back at that. Notice how you feel in your body. Who was there? What was the scene? And then if you feel comfortable, I'll just invite you just to drop into the chat, like what was that moment? And I'm going to say I got to took a walk for a phone call around the pond near my house. Like just a really nice moment. Right? Feel free to share if you're comfortable. And that might not be something that's that easy to do as a family, but what we do as a family, we started doing roses and thorns that night. Roses are a few things that you're grateful for, a few things that went well today. Thorns are something that didn't go so well today. And maybe a bud, which is like something that you're looking forward to tomorrow. Yeah, having lunch. Thanks, Alicia. And so my son is sick. So he's like, let's do like 100 roses. And I'm like, well, let's maybe do 3. Cause I know you're trying to just not go to bed right now. What a lovely husband you had. So you could be on time for this. Thanks, Jennifer. Thank your husband, please, Jennifer. Right. So like we do this with my son, and he's like, I got to play soccer after school. He just started reading, which is awesome. So he's like, I love reading. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's my rose too, is that my son now loves reading. Like, oh my gosh, he can entertain himself. Right. And we got to have dinner outside. It was a beautiful day here in Cambridge. And a thorn will probably be, he actually had to leave class early because he had a tutoring appointment today. So that'll probably be his thorn. And then what's a bud for tomorrow? What's something you're looking forward to? Because we forget to look forward to the future. And it helps us it actually really changes our mood. When there's this research, actually, if you plan a vacation, even if you never take it, but if you look to the future with something positive, it actually really lifts up your mood. So it's remembering that there's positive things. And I know you'll have teenagers and they'll roll their eyes when you say, let's do roses and thorns, but you can just say things like, oh, what was something fun today? You can be casual about it, right? Oh, wait, what's going on this weekend that's going to be fun, right? It doesn't have to be like roses and thorns, the ritual, right? As kids get older, but they might still like it. And even if, like you say, what was something good today to your 15-year-old, and I know this will happen with my kids in a few years, and their eyes roll so far back in their heads, they're still asking themselves that question, even if they don't answer you and they storm off and slam the door. And that's actually kind of exactly what you want, because then they've started to internalize it and they're still doing it, right? Whether you're there or not, but you just keep asking. Right? And it becomes that thing they do themselves. When blackout poetry, that sounds awesome. Snack while you're having meal. I know I could use a snack. I'm telling you, I'm really hungry. I have to cook dinner in a few minutes. So these are some ways that gratitude can be really helpful. So these are some ways we can take good care of our brains during this time, is with gratitude. Actually, I was talking this to a friend. I got a Christmas card from him in January. And he was talking about, he was like, our family had pandemic roses and thorns. There's a lot of thorns about this pandemic, but there were also some things that were we spent more time in nature. We spent more time together as a family. We had these other, really sweet moments. And so we can also look back on this time with that. There's cool things that have come out of this, and there's cool things that have been happening in spite of this. So lastly, I want to turn toward the social, and we know, again, relationships keep us healthy. The number of friends we have is actually very closely correlated to longevity, to physical health, as well as to mental health. And good quality friends, running into neighbors, riding 14 miles. I am on a tandem and you didn't fall down. Barbara, I am seriously impressed. Well done. One time I tried to do a tandem, I fell over immediately. My wife was not happy. So bringing more mindfulness and awareness to our relationships, right? And, again, we can get into isolation during this time. We're trying to get out of isolation now, and that's actually really hard. I'm actually really aware. It's it's a lot of work to go to somebody's house and hang out and have a barbecue, and I look forward to it, but it's kind of exhausting, and a lot of us are out of practice. We're rusty. But I think, still pushing ourselves a little bit out of our comfort zone, getting out there just a little bit more, gets us out of our head in some good ways. Connecting around the positive, right? I mentioned, we connect around the negative, right? That negativity bias stuff. But asking questions well, what new recipes did you learn during the pandemic? What books did you read? What shows? What trails did you discover nearby? And asking what are you going to do when this is over? Who are you inviting to your vaccine barbecue? I mean, I had when my wife got her vaccine, I was early to get mine. And it was 2 weeks out from her vaccine. I called our favorite restaurant, surprised her. It was vaccine anniversary. We're going out to dinner at Pammy's. It's on, right? So that we have these things to look forward to. What are you going to do this summer? These are good conversations to have, to think about. Memorial Day, 4th of July, we've got things we can look forward to. It's so important that we do that. And so finding these ways to be, connect with positive people, and we've been stuck online. And there's that saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And it's not statistically accurate necessarily, but realizing like, well, if that's even somewhat true, then like, you're the average of the 5 people who post the most in your social media. And usually that's like the loudest, kind of craziest people. And I just like realized, I was like, I can just like hide and snooze some of these really negative people in my Facebook and just bring it back to like puppies and kids and like happy things. And they don't have to know. I'm not like, blocking or unfriending them, but just like makes my online life a little more pleasant when I'm just looking at, happier scenes and things like that. So, these are ways to set kind of healthy boundaries with people too. And boundaries are a real form of self-care too. It's not just like bubble baths and stuff. It's setting good boundaries with other people who are not so healthy to have us in our lives. And then to go back to this idea about post-traumatic growth versus post-traumatic stress. And I came up with the title for the book, which is how to grow through what you go through. And the publisher just rejected it and said it was too long, but we'll see what happens with the book. But post-traumatic stress happens for a few reasons. It happens because we feel helpless and we feel out of control. But there are 2 things that we can do that are really the opposite of those. If you feel out of control, right? We and our kids, right? We can't control 6 months from now or 6 weeks from now, but we can control the next couple of days, the next few hours. We can't even control those, right? But we can have some influence over those, right? So having routines is really important for families, I think, during this time. And I know like when the pandemic started in particular, like that first Friday the 13th or whatever it was, like I remember, people posting things like, oh, here's your like pandemic homeschool schedule. And like every day, at 8 o'clock, you're going to like do a math lesson, like while you like bake breakfast as a family. And, then like 2 days later, people were then like posting these other memes that were like, I might even have a copy of one of them. Yeah, here it is. Let me find this. Where's the control on my Zoom? Right, then a few days into the pandemic, people are like, yeah, here's your new schedule, right? Wake up, iPad time, then fight and ask for snacks, right? Minecraft hour, then eat everything and fight some more, right? Like, the truth is we can find something in between these, and just having routines is so good for us. I'm not a structure guy. Like it falls apart for me if I'm super rigid, but when things are predictable, that saves us a lot of mental energy, and it feels safe for us and it feels safe for our kids. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what's happening. That's really important. It's really useful for us to do. So just thinking about, how can we create more routines for ourselves, whether it's like Taco Tuesday and game night Sunday, or, throughout the day, that these are good things that we can do to make life in this unpredictable time a little bit more predictable. And the other thing that we can do that I want to emphasize toward the end, and boy, I got through a lot of material. I guess I do talk really fast. When we feel helpless, one of the best things that we can do is try to be helpful. And so I am struck by that quote from Mr. Rogers. Actually, it's from Mr. Rogers' mom, right? When I was a boy, I'd see scary things in the news, and my mom would say to me, look for the helpers. You'll always find people that are helping. And with real little kids, we can talk about the helpers. We can talk about the doctors and the first responders and the vaccine manufacturers and the nurses and the teachers who are still showing up. And thank you, teachers who are showing up. I know it's been a real tough year for all of you. So many educator friends of mine, right? We can talk about the helpers. We can thank the helpers. But we can also, especially as our kids get older, like we can be the helpers. And this last year, these last few years, I feel like our society, from like our towns to the country to the world, just feels so kind of torn up, and in communities feeling really kind of torn apart and have been through so much. And thinking about, one of the best things that we can do is we can help each other. And it also really rebuilds the fabric of our communities. And so when I work with schools, right, I talk to them about, like, can you get the high school kids to do some tutoring of the younger kids over the summer so they can get caught up on their reading and on their math that they missed out on, or coach them in soccer or football? Can the younger kids do things like, put on concerts in the park? I was just actually hearing about this from Joe and Debbie, right? Like, put on concerts in the park, sing outside, right? Bring some joy into the world, right? People are writing like inspirational quotes and, chalk in my neighborhood and putting out little rocks that kids had made with little quotes on them to inspire us, right? There's these ways that we can actually build more connection. And we know that actually things like being of service and volunteerism and generosity are about the best way that we can activate the resilient circuits in our brain, that we can activate the happiness circuits in our brain. The research really says this again and again. And the other thing for kids, or like doing yard work for neighbors, or getting the groceries for the neighbors, or just modeling to, I check in with the neighbors, and I was bringing food to my parents a lot. There's always saying, like, I want my kids to know that, like, that's what I'm doing, and talk about that with them. I'm gonna make some food for the neighbors because they can't get out right now, right? So we're showing that to them, or asking them if they want to help us. And kids love being helpful. And I mentioned at the beginning that there are two things that help us be more resilient, kids, especially when they face these adverse childhood events, right? One is having an adult that's consistent. And the other is finding something meaningful, being a part of something bigger than themselves. Whether that's, for some people that's religion, for some people that's their career, for some people it's art, for some people it's music, for some people it's just finding some way to be of service. And I think that's what I think our society, whether it's our larger country or even just down to our smaller communities, right? Reading to kids at the library, whether it's over Zoom or volunteering there, right? These kinds of things present these opportunities where we feel good, they feel good, and we're building new connections that maybe didn't even exist before. And so these are some ways that we're not just becoming more resilient ourselves. Our kids aren't becoming more resilient just themselves, but we're actually maybe building a more resilient fabric in our society, even at the small level. And so these are some of the things that inspire me, and especially as we look out to summer, and we want to have fun this summer, but what are some of the other things that we can do to really rebuild and to invite our kids into that rebuilding process as well, because that's actually going to help them really be less selfish and be more resilient going forward. So I want to close with maybe one last, I kind of got away from mindfulness a little bit here, but I want to close with one last mindfulness practice for us. And then maybe we'll just watch a little video that some of you have maybe seen, but I really love. So just invite you, just find a comfortable position. You can allow your eyes to close or just rest in front of you. When we thought about a good moment, I'm actually going to invite you just to think about a not so good moment, even if that feels weird. Something small, like you snapped at the kids, you didn't eat your kale, you lost your patience a little bit, or you mixed up this Zoom call, right? Like we've all done. Just a little moment where it kind of felt like you weren't doing a good enough job, you fell short. And just notice how this feels in your body. Notice that kind of critical voice start chattering away in your mind. And then just like you would to a friend, just kind of validate, name this, like, yeah, this really stinks. This is hard. That sounds tough. Just finding words that feel authentic to you. This is a hard moment. That was a tough day. If you want, you can put a hand on your heart, or that might feel a little strange to you. You can try it. This is a hard moment. And then just some words, again, that you might offer a friend or even your own kids or your own students. Just kind of normalizing it, like, yeah, this has been hard for everybody. Nobody's perfect. Pencils have erasers. This pandemic is hard for all of us. None of us has lived through a pandemic before. No one's doing this right. You're not alone with this. And then some other just words of kindness or support that you might offer a friend or a child or your spouse. May you forgive yourself. May you just move on. May you let this go. May you learn from this. May you do differently tomorrow, but may you just forgive yourself. And then maybe just making that wish for the rest of us, the 30 of us who are feeling like imperfect parents or kids or whatever we are. May we all just be a little kinder to ourselves. I'll just ring the bell. You can just raise your eyes and let's just watch this little video that I find inspiring.
Tell me the one about the virus again, then I'll go to bed.
But my boy, you're growing weary, sleepy thoughts about your head.
Please, that one's my favorite. I promise just once more.
Okay, snuggle down, my boy, though I know you know full well. The story starts before then, in a world I once would dwell. It was a world of waste and wonder, of poverty and plenty, back before we understood why hindsight's 2020. You see, the people came up with companies to trade across all lands, but they swelled and got much bigger than we ever could have planned. We'd always had our wants, but now it got so quick. You could have anything you dreamed of in a day, and with a click. We noticed families had stopped talking. That's not to say they never spoke, but the meaning must have melted, and the work-life balance broke. And the children's eyes grew squarer, and every toddler had a phone. They filtered out the imperfections, but amidst the noise, they felt alone. And every day the skies grew thicker, till you couldn't see the stars. So we flew in planes to find them, while down below, we filled our cars. We'd drive around all day in circles. We'd forgotten how to run. We swapped the grass for tarmac, shrunk the parks till there were none. We filled the sea with plastic, because our waste was never capped, until each day when you went fishing, you'd pull them out, already wrapped. And while we drank and smoked and gambled, our leaders taught us why. It's best to not upset the lobbies, more convenient to die. But then in 2020, a new virus came our way. The governments reacted and told us all to hide away. While we all were hidden, amidst the fear, and all the while, people dusted off their instincts. They remembered how to smile. They started clapping to say thank you, and calling up their mums, And while the car keys gathered dust, they would look forward to their runs. And with the skies less full of voyagers, the earth began to breathe. And the beaches bore new wildlife that scuttled off into the seas. Some people started dancing. Some were singing. Some were baking. We'd grown so used to bad news, but some good news was in the making. And so when we found the cure and were allowed to go outside, we all preferred the world we found to the one we'd left behind. Old habits became extinct, and they made way for the new. And every simple act of kindness was now given its due.
But why did it take a virus to bring the people back together?
Sometimes you've got to get sick, my boy, before you start feeling better. Now lie down and dream of tomorrow and all the things that we can do. And who knows, if you dream hard enough, maybe some of them will come true. We now call it the Great Realization. And yes, since then there have been many. But that's the story of how it started and why hindsight's 2020.
If you look at the
All right. Well, thank you all again. I'm happy to stick around for a few questions. Thank you for coming out. I know it's so hard to do more Zoom when you've been on Zoom, so I really appreciate that you made this time for yourself and for your family. If you want to stay in touch, I put my information up down below. Feel free to shoot me an email or a message or something like that. But why don't I just take a minute for one or two questions?
Chris, I think there might have been one already in the chat. I don't know if you saw it.
I see one up top, actually. I'll pop in here. So early on, when we first opened up our presentation, we got a question from Jennifer, and she asks, how do I stop worrying about like the next pandemic, as it were? Like, how do I feel safe going out and being around people again? So transitioning from this period of constant kind of vigilance and alertness to something that kind of resembles more normalcy. How do you emotionally kind of handle that transition?
Yeah, and this is really hard, and it's going to be hard for us grown-ups. It's going to be hard for a lot of our kids, and some people are like, let's go, let's do this, right? And others of us need to take our time. And I would encourage you to just take your time and push yourself a little bit, slowly expand your bubble, bring more people back in, get yourself out a little bit in ways that feel safe to you. But just like give yourself a little bit of a challenge every day. And it sometimes helps to have other people to do that with a partner, with your own kids, with friends. You can feel a lot safer to take a walk or go to the grocery store, even with a friend. Like I was, kind of half joking with friends, like, who wants to go to the grocery store with me without masks this weekend, which is when they, take them, they remove them in Massachusetts. And it's like, to do things with friends or with other people. So take your time, go slow, no big rush. And I think that's a useful way to do it. Just knowing that it'll be scary and it takes practice just to get back to how things are, or how things will be again. And
I know Jennifer here notes that she can't stop worrying about the family, even though they're all fully vaccinated, laying down at night, kind of like not feeling stable and anxious, being a wife, a mother of 3 kids, and a child with special needs, and a substitute. That's a lot of responsibility, and by extension, you feel a certain sort of like responsibility to be extra safe during this period because you have all of these people to worry about. And I think one thing that I would kind of ask relating to that experience she's describing is how would you recommend handling what I'm sure we've all developed during this time is like obtrusive thoughts about like, worrying, like I know in a lot of ways people might have contamination fears or, responsibility of like, what if I get someone sick, or how am I going to take care of my family? Like if I'm a working person in a family and I have to go out for work, like what kind of steps would you offer for somebody dealing with obtrusive thoughts like that?
Yeah, I think like when we push ourselves the right amount to take those risks, that really helps. It's also, I mean, it sounds like you've also just got so much on your plate. Being a substitute, it's like, being a teacher is scary. Being a substitute is even scarier because it's different kids. And it's like, why is this person sick who I'm substituting for? I mean, it's like, that's really scary. That's really hard. And then trying to manage multiple kids on top of it, right? This is really stressful. I certainly hope, like, here's my prescription to you. Like, take a break this weekend, Memorial Day, and really give yourself some time this summer to reset and relax. You have my permission. And I hope you give yourself that same permission. And I hope your family gives you that permission too. And I think I'd encourage you also, like, just sometimes when we have these intrusive thoughts, it really helps to write about them. In fact, the research is really useful. This might sound silly. Write out some of those like scary thoughts and like rip up that piece of paper into tiny pieces, like, and it actually can really help. There's also nothing wrong with seeking out some professional help. And, I can check in with folks I know around Michigan too. And, don't want to like call you out or anything like that, but that's also always an option. And you're really not alone. This is really hard for a lot of people. So remembering absolutely that you're not alone, especially with these intrusive thoughts that come in about contamination, about worry, about, am I getting sick? Am I going to get somebody else sick? You're really, really not alone with that. So writing can be helpful. Another thing that I sometimes do for more obsessive thoughts with folks as a therapist, write down a couple of those thoughts, or actually start with some smaller thoughts, and then just write down next to it, I'm having the thought that I'm going to get sick. I'm having the thought that I'm going to get someone sick. I'm having the thought that the vaccine didn't work, right? These kinds of things. And it can help us actually see a bit more clearly, oh, these are just thoughts. Again, these are a few suggestions. They all help a little bit. Nothing helps. There's no magic bullet that's perfect, but these all help a little bit. And I think you'll over time start to feel stronger and a little bit more confident as you push yourself. But it's been such a hard year, and I can't even imagine with that job and 3 kids. I've got a job where I work for myself and from home if I want to, and I've got 2 kids and they've mostly been in school, and I feel like I've had it really easy compared to so many folks. So I hope you get some good support from folks around you and friends and family, and even seek out more if you feel like you need it. But thank you for asking. Yeah.
Thank you for that answer. I think that was really nice. We have 2 more short questions here, if you don't mind. One person asked, because I know you addressed your friend kind of asking that as well. I was wondering if you had another note. They asked, like, what was arose about the pandemic itself. So did you have any other like little insights or like as you showed in that little video there, anything kind of positive you feel like you gleaned or noticed around you during this time?
Yeah, for myself, I mean, it really has been sweet and special to have more family time. And as things open up in the US, kind of like, starting to book travel to different places to give talks again, and feeling like really kind of mixed about that, and how much do I want to do that, and what do I want to do differently going forward. But spending a lot of time outdoors as a family has been wonderful for my kids to get some good time in nature, and for me to reconnect with nature has been really important for me as well. Practicing gratitude in the evenings. And as a person who works in mental health, as a psychologist, I was giving a talk at a conference in Kuwait on Zoom. I wasn't actually in Kuwait, and was chatting with someone who was running the conference, and she was saying, what's been really interesting here is that there's been so much stigma around mental health forever. This is a psychology conference over there. And in the pandemic, everyone's just like, screw it. Like, we're all having a hard time. Like, just like stigma, forget it. Like, I need help. Like, and all of us who are therapists and in mental health, it's like, it's like, it's been a very busy time for us, like job security wise, it's been good, but it's, people are really suffering, but also people are feeling more comfortable with getting help. And that's actually been, I think, really cool to see. And people in the news talking about, their own struggles, and kind of like seeing more news coverage of mental health issues and the mental health impact. of the pandemic on people. And I think really breaking through a lot of that stigma around depression, around anxiety, around substance abuse, around so many things, and watching people talk more openly about their struggles and their journeys, and not just their struggles, but also their recovery from those things. That to me professionally has felt really inspiring to see and hear those stories.
I think that's wonderful, and that the person who asked that question even said that they enjoyed getting to hear you via Zoom, even after an all-day conference via Zoom. So
Wow,
very well to how much they've enjoyed the program. Our last question here is from Kristen. She's saying she has a 15-year-old son, and says he's very overwhelmed right now by school, life in general, and all of that during the pandemic. He sort of kind of like hit a personal pandemic wall of sorts. And so I think being both a parent and, somebody who certainly under very different circumstances, but has also been a young man in a position similar, I'm sure, in terms of school and busy life during that age, what would be one thing you would say to a 15-year-old boy going through a pretty crazy time in their life like this?
Yeah, boy, a lot. And I think one of the best things we can do as parents is normalize that. Remove all the kind of some of the explicit expectations of reminding our kids that they don't have to be perfect. But what's important is to model that for ourselves. And in my other talks, actually, I was a little bit flustered when I began the talk. And the way I sometimes introduce myself is, and it's really important for parents our kids look up to us as you figured it out, you got it all, right? And my kids probably look at me, it's I've written books, I teach at Harvard, I'm like this and that. And it's you know what, I had a hard time in high school, I had to change high schools, I went to college, 3 years in, I dropped out for 2 years to find myself or get my shit together, however you want to put that, struggling with depression, struggling with anxiety, struggling with drugs, finally got myself together, got sober, things like that, and finished school. And then even then I was I worked for an artist for a while, I worked in restaurants for a while, I worked in tech for a while, and then I was a teacher, and then I eventually went back to school to become a clinical psychologist. And to remind our kids that life isn't linear, and to tell them about all the kind of unexpected twists and turns that we've had often as parents. Our kids are sometimes not aware of those. And as they get older, it becomes this really nice kind of adult to adult or adult to teen conversation about life is really unexpected, and here's how it turned out, but it was not a straight shot for me either. I think it's important for parents to do that, for teachers to do that. And that there's so many, I think, different ways to be happy, and pointing out models of people who've taken, maybe not the most linear path always either, who turned out all right and turned out happy. But it's hard. And also to point out, this pandemic is really hard. It's been really hard on our teenagers. And let's figure out how to have some fun and reconnect, with your friends and stuff like that this summer. And thank goodness it's summer, and going to be a pretty normal looking one too. So I feel you for your son, Kristen. Thank you. Yeah.
I think that's wonderful advice. And I think with that, I would like to take some time to thank everyone here for joining us tonight. Of course, as mentioned before, this program is being recorded. It will be available to view in a week. You can also share it with friends and family who might find some comfort and encouragement in some of the topics discussed here, might enjoy some of the little pieces of advice for how to mitigate stress and learn how to kind of calm themselves down. And we do also have, so look out for that in 1 week on our YouTube channel. I believe a link should also be sent to everyone who is registered to tonight's event. You can also look forward to another one of our programs coming up. As I said, on June 1st, the story of a cancer survivor. And before I conclude tonight's program, I'd like to thank both Debbie Jones with the Rochester Area Youth Assistance, and of course, our wonderful guest, Dr. Christopher Willard. I would like to pass it off to Debbie and Chris to say any final words if you two would like, and then we can, give a goodbye to everybody.
I just want to say thank you to Chris. You've blessed our little community here in Rochester with your knowledge. Your presentation was wonderful, and we feel lucky to have had you join us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and please have a good luck with the last few weeks of school as parents, and I hope you all just have a wonderful normal summer. I wish you a wonderful, normal, healthy summer. It's the most we can hope for, and hope to be back sometime too.
Yeah, we would love you back next year. And I know Josetta Wood is trying to say something, so she's got her hand up. Let her sneak in.
I've already sent her a message here. She was asking she had any she get a link to the video, and like I said earlier, a link will be sent to everyone in the email registration list 1 week from today. So as soon as it's posted and we have a link available, it will be mailed out to every person who came in and registered for the program tonight. So
if you meant the video that I showed at the end, I'll drop that into YouTube. I'm not sure.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for the foresight. It didn't even occur to me.
Thank you for that. Hopefully we'll see you live next year, Chris.
Cool. Look forward to it. I can't wait to get on an airplane. Get out of my basement.
Never thought you'd say that, did you?
I know, right?
Take care.
Great. Take care. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome. Bye.